Right, so what have we got for you this morning? Well, here we have the agenda. We're going to start off with some opening remarks. Then we are going to have some context setting. What is the European Accessibility Act, both from a European context, followed by the Irish context as well. Then we're delighted to have some discussion of a really important aspect of the Act, which is real-time text and answering of the emergency call answering service to the European number 112. After that, something I'm really excited about is we have some users with real lived experience of issues around accessibility, things that the European Accessibility Act will address. And then we will talk you through some resources that we actually have available and some next steps for yourselves. I'm now absolutely delighted to hand over to the Chief Officer of the Centre for Excellence in Universal Design, Gerald Craddock, to open the webinar and to say a few words. Ger.
Very good. Thanks very much, Donal. And again, welcome everybody. We have a big crowd here today. We're expecting over 400 participants. So welcome everybody from Ireland and from abroad, including our Canadian friends are also coming online very early in the morning. So just who we are. We are the National Disability Authority, which is a statutory body here in Ireland, providing advice to government, particularly on disability services and various aspects on policy, etc. It also houses, which I head up, the Centre for Excellence in Universal Design, which is a statutory body, one of the only statutory bodies that we know of in the world. And key area is advancing universal design, which is a broader concept than accessibility, and very much looking at the built digital environments as well as products, services, but also looking at it from a systems perspective. Next slide there, Donal. So critical to our work is how design impacts on people, and a famous product designer, Victor Papinek, in a book he wrote back in 1971, Design for the Real World, he talks about the only important thing about design is how it relates to people. So this European Accessibility Act is very much focused on how to improve the accessibility and create a more equitable society for not only people with disabilities, but for everybody across the EU. On the next slide, Donal. So just briefly, and you can click there again, Donal, and again, and two more clicks. So we are defined universal design within our legislation. So it talks about how to access, how to understand, and how to use, be it a product or a service, to the greatest extent possible. So again, universal design may not enable all people to access everything immediately. It may require assistive technologies as part of that, I suppose, full system approach. And again, within our legislation, it talks about any people of any age, size, ability, or disability. And then on to the next slide, Donal. So that's kind of framing us. We are the national partner for this very innovative network that is funded by the European Commission, which is called the European Accessibility Resource Centre. So this webinar is very much part of the Accessible EU Centre. So just giving a brief outline what this resource is. It's a virtual centre. And on the next slide, Donal, it is a flagship initiative supported by the European Commission and very much under the strategy for the rights of persons with disabilities 2021 to 2030. So it is how to promote and advance the understanding and take up of accessibility right across the 27 EU countries. And on the next slide. So, fortunately, it is led by ONCE, which is a national disability organisation, NGO, based in Madrid, but has over 70,000 employees, one of the largest disability organisations in the world. And key partners are the European Association for Service Providers, ESPD, ENAT, the European Network on Accessible Tourism, the Johannes Kepler University based in Linz in Austria, and the Spanish Association for Standardization, UNE, which is also based in Madrid, and several other subcontractors and partners right across Europe, including ourselves being the national partner here, representing Ireland as part of this network. So what it's about on the next slide, Donal, is the list of the experts. Donal Fitzpatrick, the expert here as the contact point for Ireland. But as you can see, right across the whole of Europe, the 27 states, and we're very fortunate to have the representative of Estonia here with us today that you will hear later this morning, Jakob Rosin. So we're delighted to have Jakob with us here this morning on talking about the work in Estonia, which is really advancing the whole accessibility agenda in that country. On the next slide, Donal. So key aspects of this virtual hub, the Accessible EU offers is an online library, and a huge amount of resources are constantly being uploaded from each country across Europe, but also very much key aspects as well. Documents being developed, for example, one of our lead partners from the UK, and Fry, is developing a whole suite of modules looking at the accessibility of transport. Also an opportunity to learn about accessibility for anyone who is not up to speed, because again, that is a key part of this network. Also, the opportunity here this morning for people to be networking right across Europe, but also looking at gathering data and trying to gather data from each European country where accessibility is at any given moment in time. So that's an annual requirement from each of the partners in the 27 EU countries. Next slide, Donal. So key aspects and key events that have to be run annually from each country: awareness raising, training, and networking events. So this is one of our 3 events. We ran an event in Galway in UCG 2 weeks ago, and we're looking at hosting another event specifically looking at housing in Q4 2024. So look out for that. We'll be coming to you soon on that final event that we will be hosting in 2025. And next slide. So key people, everybody is invited. There's no charge to be part of this network. I suppose key is having people with disabilities very much participating in this, because without the lived experience, theory and practice can be very much separated. So having people with lived experience saying how the services, how the systems are working or not working, are a vital ingredient as part of this network. But also very much part of today is looking at legislators, policymakers as part of that, but also the market surveillance authorities, who are a critical part on the implementation of this European Accessibility Act, but also a whole range of other, including universities, academia, etc. And next slide, Donal. So please sign up if you're not already a member Again, it's free of charge and it is a significant network. And particularly if people are looking to develop projects, this is a great network to find other like-minded people right across the EU. Again, we can provide this information and again through our own website, which is the final slide and final thoughts from myself is further information. And again, you will hear from one of our colleagues later this morning. But information available on our website, universaldesign.ie. So thank you for your attention. And at this moment, I hand back to the lead man himself, Donal Fitzpatrick. Thank you.
Super. Thanks very much, Ger, for that. And again, I'll echo, as the national expert or the contact point, I'll echo, please do sign up to the Accessible EU. There's some great resources up there and wonderful opportunities to engage with people across Europe. This has very much been a partnership. It was a partnership with the Accessible EU, but also from our own perspective, we've had a fantastic engagement with AHEAD, the Association for Higher Education Access and Disability. It was a brilliant collaboration between ourselves and the team at AHEAD, and on behalf of myself and the team at the Centre for Excellence in Universal Design, I want to thank Deirdre, Nicole, everybody who supported us at AHEAD to pull this workshop together. It's been great working with them all over the last few weeks and months. And I'm now delighted to welcome Deirdre Moore from AHEAD to also say a few words. Deirdre.
Thanks a million, Donal. And likewise, it's been wonderful to work with you and the team over there. This was something we wanted to deliver a webinar on to our employers partnered with the WAM program, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But yeah, just to say thank you. Can I just check you can see my slides okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So as Donal said, my name is Deirdre Moore and I'm the employment manager here at AHEAD. So I'm delighted to represent AHEAD here today as we partner with the NDA and particularly the Centre for Excellence in Universal Design to explore the European Accessibility Act. You'll also be hearing shortly from my colleague Nicole Marinos, who's going to sit on the user panel to discuss her kind of experience, and she's got some really great insights to share with people later. So I'm looking forward to that. We are delighted, I suppose, to be focusing on the European Accessibility Act, especially days before it comes into force. But we also recognise in AHEAD that it's part of a wider and important landscape of accessibility efforts that are already in motion. So the EU Web Accessibility Directive, which sets rules for making websites and apps easier to use, particularly in the public sector, but also, as Ger spoke about earlier, the principle around universal design. So the idea that things should be made or created from scratch with accessibility in mind, so that they are available and accessible for everybody, regardless of ability. And that's very much at the core, I suppose, of the work that we do in AHEAD in our education and employment space. So we really want people to start thinking about these directives and acts and frameworks, not just as legal obligations and rules, but also as a creative and I suppose a broader movement towards creating a fairer and more accessible world for everybody. So whether you're an employer, a graduate, somebody that's in policy, somebody that's maybe developing products or providing services, we feel today you're going to get a lot more information and some tools and tips around how to I suppose get ready for the change and implement what's coming. So while I have a moment, I just want to share a couple of, I suppose, projects and pieces of work that are AHEAD are doing in the disability and employment space while we've such a great audience online. But before I do that, I just wanted to also, I suppose, mark and pay respect to a colleague and a friend of ours, Jackie Brown, who most of you will probably have heard of. Jackie passed away this week and was very active disability advocate across Ireland and made huge changes and advances around disability rights. And I think she was involved in a lot of formation of disability organisations, and she was involved in AHEAD over the years as well. So we just want to, I suppose, acknowledge that and pay our condolences to all her family, friends and colleagues across the country. So WAM, so AHEAD has been around since 1988, and our work is in working with and for disabled people to shape inclusive and empowering environments in tertiary education and employment. And the program that I lead out on is actually called the Willing Able Mentoring Program, and that's been around since 2005, and it's currently funded by the Department of Social Protection. So in WAM, we work with employers across the country who ring fence roles for graduates with disabilities. So they're creating opportunities for employment for people with disabilities, but they're also working alongside us to look at policy, practice, recruitment, and how to create more inclusive workplaces while they partner with us on that journey. And we're delighted that over the last 20 years, and we're actually celebrating our 20-year anniversary this year, that we've secured over 770 placements for graduates with disabilities across the public and private sector. So if you are somebody that's looking for work and has a disability, or you know somebody that has a disability and is looking for employment, we are currently recruiting roles with the ESB. So we've got 8 WAM placements available in Cork, Dublin and Liit. The closing date for those roles is next Wednesday, the 2nd of July, and you can read more about the specific jobs through the job specs and the requirements for each role by either scanning the QR code on the screen or jumping onto our website, www.ahead.ie/current opportunities. So please spread the word around that. And likewise, if you're an employer that's interested in working with the WAM program, we're always welcoming new employers to come on board with us, and you can reach out to the team wam@ahead.ie, or you can look at our website and get some more information. And we will be running an employer information session after the summer months to hear more about how you can partner with us. And then I suppose finally, I just want to announce that AHEAD have actually been working on a new collaborative national framework called the WIDE framework, or Widening Inclusion of Disability in Employment. So again, this is funded by the Department of Social Protection through AHEAD's WAM program, but we are also partnering with the Employers for Change, who are collaborating with us on the project in the role of co-chair of the advisory group. So this framework has been developed with extensive consultation with people with disabilities, employers, disability organisations, and other relevant and representative bodies around employment and disability. So what is the framework, and why might it be of benefit to you? So the framework aims to support employers in hiring, retaining and promoting disabled employees and creating inclusive workplaces. So it will be a freely accessible web platform, piece of software that will provide employers with a self-review tool that you can engage with and look at that area of hiring, retaining and promoting disabled employers. So the next, or employees, sorry. So the next slide just gives a little bit around the shape of the framework. I'm not going to spend too much time on it because I know we want to get into the main topic that we're here for, but it is divided into two pieces or overarching themes that are organizational change and culture. Organizational culture, and organizational practice. And there will be 6 domains with 16 areas of effort that you can go in and engage with, and it'll give you kind of actions and guidance notes and tools to engage with in that process. So we are aiming to launch that around autumn time this year. So there's a QR code there or an email address if you'd like to learn more about the framework or be notified of the launch, or if you want to be part of the website testing that's happening over the summer months. So yeah, that's just a little bit about what we do at AHEAD. So I'll hand back to Donal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deirdre. And we would, and the Centre for Excellence in Universal Design and the National Disability Authority, echo the condolences that you've expressed to the friends, family and colleagues of Jackie Brown. She was truly a pioneer and a wonderful advocate for people with disabilities. So thank you for doing that. And we would also echo those. Also, I think your points on employment are hugely relevant, because one of the things that the European Accessibility Act will do is make more accessible products and services available for everybody, including people with disabilities. And that will expand employment opportunities both here in Ireland and across the European Union. They would expand the opportunity for people to work in a whole variety of sectors, as well as availing of more accessible products and service in, for example, leisure or educational settings. So hugely important work that AHEAD is doing. Thank you for sharing that with us, Deirdre. And as I said, it's been a great collaboration. We're very appreciative of all the time that you gave us. I'm now really, really pleased to be able to introduce someone who is, I think it's safe to say, the main architect of the European Accessibility Act. I happened to be on a call yesterday where it was mentioned that this all began about 10, 11 years ago. So I'm really pleased to introduce Placencia, who is a senior accessibility expert working across a whole range of different projects and different work for the European Commission. In particular, we're going to focus this morning on the context of the European Accessibility Act. We're delighted to have you here. We know you're very busy. We appreciate your time. Thank you. We look forward to your words.
Thank you very much, Donal, for the invitation. And it's really a privilege to be here, even online, with you. Also, thanks and greetings to all the colleagues, including Gerald, with whom I have been working for a very, very long time. Indeed, as you say, the European Accessibility Act has been a long project. We started working many years ago. I mean, the first sketches that we have, even before we were able to talk about them outside the Commission, date from 2008, around those dates, 2008. Of course, the Commission proposal was adopted in 2015, and then the Council, Parliament discussions took place with them, and the Act, as it is now, was adopted in 2019. In the Act itself, it was required to have 3 years time for member states for transposition, and another 3 years before the rules would be applicable to economic operators. And now it is it's 2 days to go before these rules are applicable. We are working hard to make the application of the Act a successful reality. You know, we see accessibility as a precondition for participation in economy and society for persons with disabilities, but we are very much aware that it is an obligation for all the member states under the CRPD. So the Act will facilitate compliance with those obligations, and also it will be a step forward, the removing barriers for persons with disabilities. The rules in the Accessibility Act bring really coherence across Europe for the benefit not only of persons with disabilities, but also for industry, for economic operators, because it facilitates having one set of accessibility rules across Europe, and it gives legal certainty that when compliance with those rules, products and services which are accessible then would be able to be placed and circulate in the market freely. The scope of the directive is cross-sector. It concerns computers, operating systems, telephones, payment terminals, e-readers, telecoms, audiovisual, consumer banking, some elements of transport, e-commerce, e-books. And it has an impact in the Union, but also outside the Union, for 2 reasons. Because importers will have to take care that products coming from outside the Union will comply with the requirements of the Act, but also service providers that deliver the service in the Union will have to comply with the Act, even when they would not really be targeting the Union as the major market, because the directive refers to the delivery of the service in the Union. So we know it will have a huge impact in industry, in economic operators, but also we are seeing this piece of legislation really as an opportunity to get new markets, as an opportunity also to have better products and services. For example, one of the provisions or several provisions of the European Accessibility Act relate to assistive technology. And it recognizes the consumers of accessible products that they are faced with high prices and limited competition. So while the directive does not really regulate assistive technology beyond, well, it provides a definition of assistive technology that from now on is the official definition in the European Union. But what it does, it creates economies of scales, it facilitates cross-border trade mobility, and it helps to economic operators to concentrate the resources on innovation. So in relation to continuing with assistive technology, it puts responsibilities for the interoperability between assistive technologies and mainstream accessible technologies. It requires testing with the assistive technology, the functionality of the products and the services, and it requires that this information is reported so that it is to the consumer, that the consumers are informed with which piece of equipment has the product, the mainstream product been tested, and what has been the result of those tests. I mean, whether it really works well together. The Accessibility Act focuses when it puts requirements on information, having accessible information about the functioning of the product or the service, but also about the accessibility features and characteristics. Let me say that already a lot of effort is being placed on mainstream products being accessible, but consumers with disabilities are not yet fully aware of all the potential that accessibility features provide, and are not always able to use it in a easy way. So this would also be an improvement. So let me say a few words also about the enforcement of this directive, because it is a very different instrument from that perspective than many other accessibility legislation around the world, which is more aspirational. It contains much more general objectives to remove barriers. But because the Accessibility Act is very precise, having in its annex a set of accessibility requirements, clear accessibility requirements, it allows for a strong enforcement. First, economic operators will have to declare compliance with the accessibility requirements of the directive. Then the directive creates, as for creation of accessibility authorities that are going to be surveying the market or checking compliance of services. But third, it allows persons with disabilities to take action in front of the court or the adequate administrative body to claim the compliance with the directive. What is also important is that it allows not only an individual with a disability, but also organizations, for example, DPOs, who have a legitimate interest to take action in front of the court to that very same objective. And this is really an important step forward. But let me say that while the directive refers, of course, to penalties and to be effective, dissuasive, and disproportionate, it puts a lot of effort, a lot of emphasis on remedial action. The intention is not to punish everybody. The intention is to ensure that at the end we have really accessible products and services in the market. So these authorities that I mentioned for the enforcement would engage with economic operators in case there are issues signaled, for example, by persons with disabilities, to remedy those problems and to make sure that corrective measures are put in place so that the products and the services will be accessible. In addition to facilitate to economic operators the implementation of the Act, we have launched a standardization process. It's so-called Mandate 587. It requires a revision of 3 existing standards in the area of ICT, in the area of built environment and design for all, and creation of 3 new ones. The one on non-digital information, one on support services, customer services, for example, and a very important one on answering to emergency communications through 112. This is a crucial new obligation in the Accessibility Act. Until now, EU law referred to the obligation of telecom operators to provide emergency communications, which were also accessible for persons with disabilities. But now, also the public authorities, the so-called PSAPs, will have to answer in a similar accessible way as the calls that enter, the calls that reach them. This is a very delicate matter because the lives of people could be at risk. So we really urge economic operators, service providers of telecom service, of electronic communication services, to put on the market these accessible emergency communications and test them so that the 2 extra years until 27 that the directive provides to public authorities, to PSAPs, to respond are well on accessible manner, is that time that is well used to be sure that those communications work well. So to finish, let me say that this Saturday is the deadline for application, and for me, and I know that for many of you, it's a day of celebration because persons with disabilities will have more accessible products and services, but also economic operators will have improvements in their products and services by accessibility in terms of flexibility, personalization, adaptability for the whole population. And I dare to ask and encourage economic operators to go beyond the list of products and services in the Act and apply those improvements on accessibility to other products and services. But it's not that the work is finished. I mean, the 28th of June, we will continue working with member states to fine-tuning the legislation to be fully aligned with the legal text. We also continue working with the stakeholders on the standardization, and of course, I left it last but not least. Accessible EU is one of the tools that we have contracted, we have created and launched in order to support the implementation, to increase in Europe the competencies, the capacity to implement European accessibility legislation. With that, I finish and I pass the floor back to the chair. Thank you.
Emma, thank you so very much for that wonderful overview of the European Accessibility Act. And I am going to pick up on one point myself that you just raised, which is the benefits of accessibility for everybody. I would say to people on this call, and I'm sure there are many of you who have no experience of accessibility or very little experience of accessibility, who are worried, who are fearful about this new act, what's it going to mean? I would say to you, please don't be afraid of accessibility. Don't be afraid of inclusion. Treat it as a benefit for your product, for your service, for your business, but as well as that for your customers and clients. Because by improving accessibility for people with disabilities, by looking at the European Accessibility Act as a benefit to you, you will gain revenue. And I do know that some of our user experience panel that we'll meet later on are going to speak very much to this topic. And other things that Emma has mentioned will also be delved into a little bit more deeply later on in this particular webinar. But again, Emma, thank you very much for your time. We do know how busy you are in the run-up to the commencement of the European Accessibility Act on June 28th. We're very, very grateful indeed. I'm now really pleased to introduce Lianne Reddy, who again has been instrumental in the transposition activities and implementation activities from an Irish perspective. Lianne, you're going to talk to us a little bit about the European Accessibility Act, very much from an Irish perspective and context. So we're delighted to have you with us. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Donal, and thanks very much for the opportunity to be here. It's a very exciting week, obviously, as the EAA comes into effect on Saturday. So I work in the Department of Children, Disability and Equality here in Ireland. Our department would have coordinated the transposition of the directive into Irish law. And so I'm just going to talk briefly to you about the EAA in Ireland, the approach we've taken to implementation, and how our preparations thus far. So just to provide some context, in the last Irish census in 2022, we learned that there are approximately 1.1 million people living with some degree of disability in Ireland. So this represents approximately 1 in 5 people in the Irish population. And so while there is a perception at times that accessibility only affects a small number of people, the reality is that this is a very mainstream issue, very much a mainstream issue. And this was something that was at the forefront of our minds when we were approaching implementation of the directive. But as we know, and has already been said by Emma, that individuals with accessibility needs often find themselves with a much more limited and often a much more expensive range of products and services to choose from. And so the EAA is a really, really huge step forward to improve availability and affordability of accessible products and services. But as also been already said, there are benefits of accessibility for all. When services and products are inclusive by design, everyone wins. From a business perspective, there are really huge benefits in not having to navigate different accessibility standards across the single market. And that's particularly true for small and medium-sized enterprises. So in its impact assessment for the directive, the Commission said that it estimated the cost to the single market of non-standardization was approximately €20 billion annually. And so there's really high stakes here in terms of the benefits that can be taken from the EAA. And so you have new economic opportunities for trade across the EU, and particularly as the demand for accessible products and services is high and the number of people with disabilities is projected to increase as well. So it's a growing market. And so all of this, I suppose, was in our minds as we approached our transposition and our implementation of the directive. So we transposed the directive by statutory instrument, which is secondary legislation in Ireland, towards the end of 2023. And in terms of our implementation, our market surveillance and our compliance monitoring, we've taken a mainstream and multi-agency approach. And so the approach has been that existing regulatory agencies that already had responsibilities for products and services covered by the EAA have also been assigned responsibility for monitoring compliance with the EAA. And so in total, we have 6 agencies that have been assigned responsibilities. And we felt that approaching implementation in that way meant that we could leverage the expertise of very experienced regulatory bodies with long-standing industry links. And we felt that it was an opportunity to ensure that the rights of persons with accessibility needs could be upheld on an equal basis to others by mainstream agencies, and that this would be very much in accordance with our obligations under the UN CRPD. So, as I say, we have 6 agencies. They're the Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, the Commission for Communications Regulation, the National Transport Authority, the Irish Aviation Authority, the Central Bank of Ireland, and Comisiún na Man, which is an Irish name, but it's the Media Commission. So we're also very fortunate in Ireland to have a National Disability Authority, and particularly a Centre for Excellence in Universal Design. So our colleagues Gerald and Dónal and other colleagues in the Centre for Excellence. And so they also have a role under our legislation transposing the directive to provide advice and technical expertise and assistance on accessibility issues to the regulatory agencies. And so we felt that there was this combination of that regulatory expertise and then the accessibility expertise that we could provide a really robust and effective implementation model for the directive. So in terms of our practical preparations, there's been a huge amount of work going on in all of the various agencies to communicate with their sectors, with their stakeholders, to raise awareness of the obligations under the EAA. There's obviously a huge body of work to set up mechanisms for handling complaints and monitoring compliance for a new area. But again, one of the benefits of taking a mainstream approach with existing agencies is that you could also leverage some existing infrastructure and mechanisms as well. There have been some great achievements in preparations thus far, and I won't list them because they're not my achievements, they belong to the agencies. But I know that Donal Rice from the Commission for Communications Regulation, known as Comreg in Ireland, will be speaking to you about some of that during this workshop. But just as a final note, just to say that the EAA is a great step forward in accessibility. There is a lot of work left to do, and we know that. And as Irish policymakers, we're exceptionally aware of that. And as has already been said, accessibility is a requirement for inclusivity and participation. And a lot of work has been ongoing in Ireland over the last couple of years to develop a new national disability strategy, and which is very close to being finalised, and which will be published in the coming weeks. And accessibility will be a really key enabler to that strategy. And we're going to see more coordinated action on accessibility across government, greater awareness of good practice in universal design, good practice in the built environment, how we provide information to the public, including through information and communication technologies, and in the delivery and design of services as well. And so I'll leave it there, just to thank colleagues in the Centre for Excellence in Universal Design for all of the support they're providing to ourselves as policymakers, and also to the agencies as we prepare for implementation. And I hope that this has been useful, and I look forward to seeing the really great benefits of the EAA after this week. Thanks very much, Donal.
Lianne, that was great. Thank you very much. And I think your point on the regulatory agencies, you're quite right. A huge amount of work is ongoing from the regulators. We're delighted to be supporting them over the next, since indeed transposition started and since implementation started. And we look forward to continuing those relationships over the next years and months ahead. You mentioned, Lianne, in your words about some really innovative stuff that's actually happening, and I'm really pleased now to introduce a former colleague who used to work with us in the National Disability Authority and now has moved to Comreg, Donal Rice, and also delighted to be joined by Sarah Foran, who's Regulations Manager at Vodafone, to talk to us about real-time text and answering of the emergency call answering service in Ireland. This is a very, very, very new technological advancement for us here in Ireland, and I'll say it's very cool. So Donal, over to yourself.
Thanks very much, Donal, and hello everyone, and wishing everyone success in implementing what you need to implement before the commencement of the European Accessibility Act on Saturday. And we at Comreg have been very busy over the past while preparing for the implementation. And one aspect of that that we've seen some success in Ireland with so far is the implementation of real-time text by service providers. So just to say, what I'm going to introduce and what Sarah is going to present is really the work of the service providers, the telecommunication service providers, and our provider of the emergency call answering service in Ireland, which is BT. So I've got a couple of slides I'm just going to use to set the scene. As Emma did say that there is a derogation available to member states around the provision of RTT in order to facilitate access to real-time to emergency services for persons with disabilities. In Ireland, we didn't take that derogation, so the requirement for service providers to facilitate and enable the use of RTT for access to emergency call answering services in Ireland comes in on Saturday. And that's what Sarah is here to present, is progress made by Comreg in that regard. Sorry, as I'm trying to do two things at once here, can I confirm that my yeah, all good. Thanks, Cormac. So look, RTT is a pretty cool service. It is a new service that the EAA has mandated to come in. So it's somewhat different to the other obligations under the Act. Rather than making mainstream products and services accessible, this is a new service. But in some way, it's also about making a mainstream service. So being able to access emergency services through your telephone in an accessible way. And it's crucial. It's really, really crucial for emergency services. And my colleagues in Comreg take their responsibilities around monitoring the quality of access to emergency services in Ireland really, really seriously. And it's crucial for enabling access to emergency services for individuals with hearing or speech impairment and to communicate effectively during emergency calls. And we'll see in a little bit, Sarah might give us a little demonstration, and it's RTT is actually such a simple service. It's really hard to describe in words what it is, but it's actually simply a continuous character by character text exchange, eliminating the delays associated with traditional asynchronous text messaging and relay services. So it's a somewhat equivalent to a voice call in that it can be conducted at the same time and with a voice call or on its own. And it has the same kind of cadence as a voice call, where you see in text what the other person is typing as they type, and you can preempt what they're going to say. You can finish their sentence from them. You can interrupt them. So while it's a cool service, it's really, really important when it comes to emergency services, because it ensures clear and immediate communication in emergency situations where voice calls may not be feasible. Okay, so the legal obligation is contained in the statutory instrument that transposes the European Accessibility Act in Ireland, and that requirement is there for service providers to ensure RTT is supported on their networks by this Saturday, and it's also got its foundation in the electronic communication codes, which Comreg, as the national telecommunications regulator, has a range of powers in enforcing. So just to say, before I hand you over to Sarah, there is a number of nuances to this, in that RTT, when it comes to providing access to emergency communications, the obligation is in the Act. There's also an obligation that persons using a phone can use RTT in person-to-person calls, okay? And then there's an obligation around total conversation. And the last time I talked about RTT, Emma picked me up that I hadn't mentioned total conversation, but that's another really important service as well, where voice, video, and RTT is synchronized. And that's really applicable to what are called over-the-top services, OTT services, such as Microsoft Teams. And we see that Microsoft Teams have committed to enabling total conversation by enabling RTT in their service, Microsoft Teams, by June. So it's on the roadmap to implement it and roll it out. So while today's presentation from Sarah does not cover total conversation, it is important to remember that there is an obligation for ECS providers to ensure total conversation should their products facilitate video as well. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to hand you over to the interesting part of the presentation, which is Vodafone's implementation of RTT. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Donal. I'm going to just share a couple of slides now and we'll be good to go. Sorry, now, can I confirm now that slides are starting to share?
Yeah, all good.
Fantastic.
Just put them in full screen there.
Brilliant. So thank you very much for having me here today. It's lovely to be here to talk about this. So like Donal said, my name is Sarah Foran and I'm from Vodafone. So, you know, to echo a lot of things of what Donal said there. So real-time text, it's a really important service, and this is about services for calls to 112 emergency services. So this is currently active on the Vodafone network, where you can make calls between devices on the Vodafone network. So just to flag that other operators will be coming live with this soon, but just Vodafone have it active now. So this service, as Donal said, it's for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, or maybe speech difficulties. It's going to be really, really beneficial. So I'm going to move on here, and you're going to see a little bit of a demo on the screen of what it's going to look like. And I'll just talk you through that. But I'll just to explain where our partnership came. We piloted this connectivity with Comreg and the BT emergency call answering services. So it's been fully active since December 2024, when we first activated the 112 calls with real-time text. So you can see on the screen, and it is, as Donal said, it can be difficult to almost explain. So it's nice to see a visual. When ordinarily you might be texting somebody, you see the speech bubble, you don't see the words themselves populating. But now you're seeing it character by character. The emergency services call answerer can see the caller, what they're typing, character by character, so they can pick up a lot faster what's required, what's needed, what needs to be directed, where does it need to go. So it's giving that instantaneous conversation. So it's just making that communication a bit faster and clearer and better. So I'll let that play out for a sec so you can see exactly what it's like there. So it's the two-way conversation. What's the trouble? I have fallen, and the caller doesn't even need to finish the sentence where the answerer can get that understanding of, okay, where do I need to direct this? So just to give you a little bit of background of the pilot. So why Vodafone? How did Vodafone started? So it was right place, right time. It was circumstance. Vodafone were happening to switch off their 3G network. So it just fell in line to do this pilot in partnership with Comreg and with ECAS. So we were very lucky that the timing was right that we could do this. So we started deployment in April 2024, and then we had went live December 2024. So it was good timing for everybody and for Vodafone. But like I mentioned earlier, this will be available with all operators very, very soon. if I move on slightly now, I'm just going to show you what it looks like, or what it did look like and what it does look like for the emergency call answering service when they receive a message through. So you can see on one side of the screen there, a message is sent and you're waiting for the response. But now you've got this real-time text here where you can see the operator is receiving a message through. I see smoke. So straight away they know, okay, fire service. I see smoke outside my windows. It moves on. They can put in the address straight away, so they can start actioning out the services that need to be provided straight away without having to wait to hit return to see the full information come in. So it just gives that faster communication, faster call to action. So that'll play out there. That's just giving you a little insight as to what it looked like. And I'll move on then again. And this is just really to show you how the service currently works. So the 112 operators, they filter for the Blue Life Service, the emergency, the ambulance service, guards, fire brigade, Coast Guard. So initially that was through voice, through text, or through eCall, which is the button in your car, and your new car does eCall. But now we have the real-time text service. So this is operated by BT, and it's fantastic now that this is in addition to it that we can provide. So I guess just to summarize in conclusion is just, the benefits to this. It's a new feature. Following the release, Vodafone did meet with Chime and the members of Cabra Village to show the service and just to get some insight. And the sessions were really, really valuable. We were told, preference would be to have sign language based services. And while we can't resolve that straight away, we did take an action to highlight that at the European Emergency Number Association conference. And we did do that. But the feedback was that it's really empowering. It's great that it's not something that needs to be registered for, because it's available on their handset on the Vodafone network, and that it's part of the standard call, that it's not an additional service that needs to be opted in or paid for, which was really positive. And as an operator now, we're looking at the next steps of what it means for roaming, how it's going to work across other networks, but also it's the additional benefits that could come with it for the future, for security situations, for somebody who needs to communicate but can't talk. But, alongside illness situations, is, stroke assistance for patients who can't communicate if they lose their power of speech, they can text. So the possibilities are endless with this, and it's a fantastic service that we're delighted to be a part of. So that's me.
Sarah, Donal, thank you so much for taking the time to show us that this morning. I think it's one of those things that one can actually just look at and really see the endless possibilities. Whether, as you say, it's around patients who have had strokes, or indeed, the obvious one is as you've demonstrated, answering the emergency call answering service and making emergency related calls. But I'm sure that as time goes on, and as always happens with things related to accessibility, innovation will kick in and people will find really innovative and interesting ways to use the real-time text. So to Donal and Sarah, thank you very, very much indeed for sharing that with us. And indeed, it actually brings it very nicely around now to what we've called our user experience panel. And I'm really pleased to have three speakers with us this morning, three contributors with us this morning. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around each of them and allow them to introduce themselves very, very briefly to you. And then we have some kind of a conversation for the next half an hour about what the European Accessibility Act means for our panelists and what it means for the wider accessibility ecosystem. Nicole, can I start with yourself? Would you like to introduce yourself?
Of course, thank you, Donal. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nicole Marinos. As it's been mentioned, I am a one project officer with the head. And as someone who is hard of hearing, I'm here to share some real life examples of how accessibility or lack of it has shaped my life.
Thank you, Nicole. Adrian, we'll come to you next.
Morning, everybody. My name is Adrian Carroll. I work as Senior Policy Officer at AsIam, which is Ireland's autism charity. I also sit on, as a member of the board of the National Disability Authority. I'm here to kind of share. Some insights and some experiences around how businesses can make practices more inclusive for autistic and neurodivergent people. And I'm delighted to be here with you all this morning.
Thank you very, very much, Adrian. And last but by no means least, speaking to us, I believe, from a meadow in Estonia, Jakob, good morning.
Yeah, hello, good morning, everybody, and delighted to be here. Yes, I am in the middle of the meadow, stealing a few days for a little vacation here before work goes on. So yes, I'm Jakob Rosin. I am a digital accessibility specialist, or accessibility is what I do all day long because I'm running my own company here in Estonia called Liit, which is doing accessibility testing, training, and service design in all kinds of levels. And obviously, this is tied into European Accessibility Act in all kinds of levels. But also, I'm a user. I've been totally blind since birth, so I get to see the impact of accessibility or inaccessibility firsthand myself every day as well.
Thank you very much. It's great to have the three of you with us. Nicole, I have to come to you first, if you don't mind, because we've just seen the demonstration there of the real-time text. How do you think this is going to impact your use of emergency services and indeed other people's use of emergency services?
Thank you, Donal. So that was an excellent demonstration. It's the first time I've seen that, so I just wanted to highlight that. And it's already been almost kind of discussed here that voice calls aren't always reliable for people with hearing loss, especially in emergencies. The hearing loss itself can make communication difficult when you're trying to understand unclear speech. There's different accents, possible background noise, or just, again, the stress of the moment dealing with an emergency. So the real-time text completely changes that. It will let me explain what's happening in my own words and without having to rely on someone else to speak for me. And of course, as it's been mentioned, and it's so important with the Accessibility Act, I will also have that independence wherever I am within Europe. So that is an amazing feature to have now.
I think that independence point is hugely important, because I think that's what accessibility brings, isn't it? It is. I mean, if I come to you, Jakob, on this, I mean, independence is what this is all about, really.
Absolutely. I mean, I think this is what accessibility. I mean, when I need to define accessibility really in really broad words, what I usually say is that it means independence, and it does mean that you are able to do things yourself in your own way, in your own time, without asking for extra help, which is often the case when you are blind or you have some other disability, right? So independence in this sense gives us, or accessibility gives us the independence to actually do whatever we want. Whether it would be buying something from an online store, or whether it would be the way we want to communicate. Like if we look at RTT, there's, it's on one side it is an accessibility feature, making it possible for people with hard of hearing to be able to communicate with emergency services, for example, but also with people who are in a situation where you cannot talk. Maybe it's a dangerous situation, or you're unable to talk. So, I mean, this is I think the beauty of accessibility is that, which is often not realized. It's not, I mean, obviously it is all in all kinds of ways, it is to do with people with disabilities, but in so many levels, it gives new ways to interact with technology and life in general for everybody. And I think this is what we should not forget, that accessibility, when done right, makes the experience way better for everybody.
Absolutely, Adrian. I know you were talking about some of this when we were chatting last week about the importance of accessibility being done right, and the importance of the independence that it actually brings. Can you elaborate on some of that?
Right, Donal. Sorry, that's right, Donal. I think one of the things I think that was really that just also to kind of expand a bit around Nicole's point as well, about that this is an example. This is a really practical example of helping supporting a wide range of people with a wide range of sensory impairments and disabilities as well. So I think one of the things that I kind of find sorry, one of the things that's been really kind of helpful as well, that would be really helpful with a service like this would be example for like say whether it is an autistic person who might need to have more time to process information, for instance, or might need to have more who might need I suppose you might not might kind of might under stress might find it difficult to kind of communicate using spoken language, and also for non-speak for members of our or for people who are non-speaking or minimally speaking, and who have a preference for using communication devices as well. But those are, I suppose, cohorts where it is when you're looking at like introducing accessibility features, it's just one cohort that is served by a design, and that is or by one, it's already one cohort of a community that is supported by introducing such a feature. And I think it's one of those things as well that having to like again kind of tying into I suppose like the business case and kind of putting the EAA into practice as well. These are kind of really practical examples where having that support in place benefits everyone, benefits everybody. And it's kind of and I think it's also kind of a real example of putting universal design into practice. So what it is that you're kind of, whilst the EAA can be quite an abstract thing in terms of looking at from a legal and from a policy perspective, seeing those kind of practical examples in place, like and also kind of looking at like these are things that support people with sensory differences, people with intellectual disabilities, making sure that information and people can and supports are as available or accessible as possible. But those are things that are are investments into your business in the same way that it would be that it in much the same way as other investments into your business as well. So I think it is kind of really future proofing to meet a wider cohort of people of the disabled community, but also I suppose like the wider but also kind of recognizing that disability is part of society as generally, and I think if you were to kind of look at like the sort of like the one if you're kind of looking at like 1 in 5 people having I suppose having a disability kind of reflected in the most recent census, sorry, it's somebody. It might not necessarily be it might be somebody you know on an individual level. It might be somebody, it might be a friend, it might be a neighbor, it might be a colleague, for instance. But these are all things that, if we were to kind of look at it this way, that these are things that support everybody in society as a whole, if that makes sense.
I think they're great points, Adrian. Yeah, and I you mentioned supports and Jakob. One of the things that you really wanted to touch on this morning was the fact that to take that point that Adrian just made, that it does benefit everybody, and that companies really shouldn't be afraid of accessibility.
No, they shouldn't. It is very clear that accessibility has the benefit of creating a better user experience, which on the other hand creates more loyal customers. So I think instead of, because I talk to companies every day or a lot in my work, and most of them do see accessibility as a legal compliance, which now is implied by the European Union. And we shouldn't do that. I mean, it is obviously a legal compliance, and it is great, but we actually should see accessibility as a business opportunity. I mean, there's data from the e-commerce sector where there has been research which says that 60% of e-commerce operators say that they see rise in customer loyalty after making their website and applications accessible. And about 37% of them see actual gain in revenue. So those are real numbers. Those are real people. And this is the thing. Accessibility isn't, it, it isn't. I mean, some people have told me like it seems like to be a charity case. I mean, it totally is not, because I am a huge technology nerd personally, and I love to buy all kinds of gadgets. And my wife doesn't approve this because I usually do impulse purchases. Um, and it's very hard for me to sometimes do impulse purchases because there are so many obstacles. There's like, I find a cool little thingy I want to buy and want to play with, some kind of new fancy gadget. And I will put it into my basket on the website, and oh no, the checkout form is inaccessible. So now I need to spend 45 minutes in putting in my postcode. And this isn't impulse purchase anymore. I get loads of chances to question my purchase, and probably I won't do this in the end because there have been so many cases. And this is a very direct example of how you can benefit. And since you touched on support, which also the European Accessibility Act addresses, I think support is a brilliant example in the sense that I'm personally, I because of my work, I need to know how the ins and outs of website design or web development and an app development works, so I know what's wrong. But as a user, I really don't need to know. I want to call up or write to the support agents and tell them, hey, I'm a screen reader user, for example. I want to use your website and buy something. And how do I get through the checkout process? And I want to be, I want that I get answers. So, very direct example. For example, Donal, but you might not know this, but Donal and I both are huge audio nerds. We love sound gear and microphones and mixers and all kinds of things. And then when you look at the user manuals of most of sound gear, then they refer to buttons on those devices with graphics. Now, a screen reader doesn't read graphics. It does look at the file name or any kind of tag which is given in the code for this image. And usually you will hear, okay, to delete the recording, press graphic 11, then press graphic 12, and then press graphic 846. And this is how you delete recordings on your recorder. Not very intuitive. So, for example, if we now commit in making our user manuals accessible by just labeling those graphics and then adding some other markup, we are already giving so many people access to our technology and then making it possible to use those. I really want to give a shout out. This is a little niche thingy, but Zoom is a very known audio gear producer, and they're making some recorders, sound recorders, which are now you can buy from regular stores, and they talk. They have built-in speech, and they are not specialized blind persons recording devices. They are mainstream audio gears, which professionals who are recording things for Hollywoods and big companies, they are using those same things, but they are now accessible, and their user manuals are accessible. You can go on the website, and instead of hearing graphic 11 and graphic 836, you hear press the menu button, press the down arrow, press the OK button, etc. And it really is beautiful to do that at 3 a.m. if I want to, without burdening anybody. So I think this is the key where we want to go, and understand how do we make the experience really equal to everybody.
Thanks, Jakob. I'll just flag for everybody that we've got a few questions to get through, and we are just getting slightly just tight on time. So if I could just ask my panel participants just to be mindful of that. Thanks very much, Nicole. Back to you. Support services are a huge part. It's been mentioned by both Adrian and Jakob, but support services, help desks, support services, all that kind of thing. Have you experienced many kind of, pain points around that, accessing the support service? I mean, Jakob mentioned it there, but, having to make a phone call to make a purchase, for example. Have you experienced any pain points around this?
I certainly have, Donal, and just to echo Jakob's point, it can be so difficult when you're trying to make that purchase, but also getting in contact with support services. So again, like that, it's a reliance on phone calls where there mightn't be an email function, there mightn't be a chat function, and of course no real-time text function either. And these can make it really challenging because when I'm on the phone call, a staff member might speak too fast or they mightn't repeat things clearly. And another factor again, and I'll keep saying this, especially for phone calls, is the background noise that can really influence, and the hearing aids pick up sound all around. So while I may be on the phone call, if there's background noise within the phone call or around me, it really makes it difficult to communicate. One thing I really do struggle with when I'm getting onto support services or making a payment and need to ring support services is being put on hold, because that on hold music actually feeds directly to my hearing aids. So it isolates me from the environment I'm in, and I can't hear someone if they're coming to speak with me. And we all have had experiences where the on hold can last for a good few 10, 20
Indeed.
minutes in cases like that. So I would always find that quite difficult to navigate, especially in terms of I would be okay if anything I needed to type for purchasing payments. And it's really until the payment time where I'd have to call a bank line, especially this is the case where I would run into struggles in trying to verify the payment. But then another issue would be a lot of these payment pages have timers. So it would end up timing out as I've gotten verification, and I'd have to start the process again or just say, was this purchase really worth it to continue this process again? And like that, it's just, we can have, to me, it may sound like small things for others, but another issue would be we're talking about support services, e-commerce, but you also have to contact public services and IT support services too. And again, with my job, I would always have to ensure something technological hasn't gone wrong for my computer. And like that, it's calling these services can cause a hindrance in terms of workday too, when you're trying to get all your tasks done. And a lot of the time, let's say with IT services, they might have to take control of your computer. So sometimes it's the knock-on effect where I might email them, ask for assistance, and this is the same with public services too. You can email first, but a lot of the times it's followed up by phone call unless stated otherwise. And in some cases, when you're discussing payment processes or banking details, there won't be an acceptance of an alternative method because they need to verify it's you talking through the phone. So it can be a really great struggle for me. I will say though, I have had a positive experience in terms of support services. Quite recently, I booked into a hotel online and they had a booking form which asked if I had any accessibility needs. So of course I disclosed my disability, and to my surprise, when I arrived into my room, they had provided me an alternative fire alarm device. So it was such a great thing for me. It might sound small, but I felt safe. And when I checked in, I wasn't asked any questions or I didn't have to explain anything. So in terms of when we're talking about support services, to me, this was the gold standard where they anticipated the needs and then embedded accessibility into the process from the beginning.
Interesting. And Adrian, for yourself, I mean, support services again for the demographic that AsIam works with. For yourself, what would your observations on this one be?
So I think I can probably speak to some of my own personal experiences and with members of the community. And I think one of the things that we kind of find with working with I suppose as well with supporting autistic people is that a lot of people find like environmental barriers and accessibility barriers to be kind of to have a significant impact on, I suppose, our day-to-day life. So it's the idea of like if you go into a supermarket, you go to a kiosk, you scan your items, and let's say for instance if something just lets out, let's say allow warning, for instance, or if somebody, or for example, it's the kind of idea that you're walking into an environment loud noises, bright lights, for instance, or where lots of things might be kind of happening, and lots of things might be kind of happening at the same time. And whilst a lot of businesses and organizations have done quiet hours and quiet places as well, they're also, I think what is important as well to consider is that for members of the community, they shop at times that aren't necessarily those quiet hours, aren't those quiet hours. So and I think even in terms of things like that, with with kind of like the noises in the background as well, like the noises as well. It's the I think for whenever I'm in a place where I'm kind of wherever I'm in a place where I'm overwhelmed as well, it's harder to kind of navigate the environment or the setting as well. So I think it's that kind of I suppose in that kind of way, it's sort of when you're looking at like when you're kind of there when you're there, and if even as an autistic person, or if you have a family with a member who is who is autistic as well, it's needing that information to kind of process things, process the sensory environment. So it's the idea of having a quiet, is there a quiet space in your vicinity? Is your website accessible? Are there ways that are there options for people to be able to kind of communicate and to process information in ways that they prefer? So that this is where we can kind of would use things like sort of easy to read and sort of these visual guides, as well as ways that can kind of support people to map different stages of going on. I suppose that and that kind of maps. That's kind of a way for people to really enhance the user experience for many autistic and neurodivergent people, but also there's kind of a recognition that this is a group or cohort of community that has been rapidly expanding, particularly in the last few years, as more people are receiving a diagnosis of autism or self-identifying as autistic. So I think there is that. I think in terms of things like that, so in terms of supporting, when it comes to kind of like supporting autistic people, it is some people kind of found that some of the restrictions that would have happened with COVID-19 was helpful for some people. So it's the idea of just having social distancing, having people being mindful of personal space, but also kind of having those space where people are kind of quiet and where businesses might naturally be a bit quieter, and that kind of gives people more opportunity to really process and to be able to kind of think about what they're going to do, to think about what they're kind of going to what to decide how they're going to kind of navigate their experience visiting a website or going to a store or visiting your business, for instance. So I think it's really about trying to prepare people with that. But I think for a lot of people, I know speaking from my own personal experience, I think it's really helpful to kind of have that, like, have an experience where I can think about a process one step at a time, rather than trying to rather than necessarily trying to kind of overload my brain by lots of different things happening at once. So it's those things where you can kind of offer really kind of practical, I suppose, both kind of really kind of practical advice and support, but also kind of realize that, like, it's harder when you're in a situation and you're already kind of heightened and stressed as well, which we kind of find for many autistic people who might come into an environment or setting, and they might be very distressed, they might be very dysregulated, might already be distressed or dysregulated. These are things that just add on to that sometimes businesses can inadvertently add to the sensory load of a person, and add to that kind of person's anxiety and stress without necessarily meaning to. But also there's ways for businesses to really kind of help with with kind of supporting the person to navigate your store. So it's really about kind of having information easy to read. Is there a visual guide on your website? Are there sensory maps in your store, for instance? These are, I suppose, really kind of but also even in terms of kind of things like having your website as well, on your website as well, having clear signage and visual schedules, strong sense and clutter, minimum, and kind of making sure to kind of minimize that. And those are kind of little things. Those are things that we can kind of do. Are small things, but they really do add up to make a really big difference for many autistic people and families as well.
Thanks very much, Adrian. Some great tips there about what to do, particularly in both the physical and the digital environments. And again, some of the things that Adrian is suggesting there will benefit all users. Just going to fly around the table now, the virtual table, very, very quickly. Jakob, kind of last two are short questions, really. But what are you looking forward to most about the European Accessibility Act coming into force?
I'm really looking forward to actually losing the friction in the daily life of myself, of countless other people with disabilities or any kind of other needs. I'm looking for the fact that I don't really need to worry about is this going to be accessible for me, that I can not when choosing a service, when going about my daily life, whether it would be by transport, whether it would be e-commerce already mentioned, or getting a book. I'm really looking forward to the time where I don't really need to worry about how am I going to be able to do this. Because I see everybody else doing this all the time. I see everybody else, tapping those payment terminals which have touchscreens and are able to see, oh, there's a discount and there's an ad. I want to even, don't quote me directly on this, but I want to be on the same level. I want to know the same things sighted people do, and get access to, for example, even advertisements, for example, on some displays, which would mean they would be accessible for me. So, to wrap it up, what I want to have is not worry about will it be accessible today or will it be accessible or inaccessible tomorrow, because this is also a frequent case where you just wake up and your tools you use have become inaccessible because of an update. So I really, really hope that the European Accessibility Act will take some of that friction away.
Adrian, I'll come to yourself. What are you looking forward to most?
I think it's also kind of saying I think the European Accessibility Act, if you were to kind of boil it down to its essential parts, it's really about kind of saying that it's good for business, it's good for society, and it's good for business. So I think it's just kind of saying to people that everybody in society or everybody in community is impacted in disability in some way, and kind of really, and I suppose making your processes and your and like making your processes and your environments more accessible allows businesses to reach to like a wider customer base, but it's also about kind of really about improving. It's also kind of really about kind of customer sort of satisfaction and kind of like support as well. So people kind of feel that they are supported by having these supports in place, such as quiet spaces, such as accessible websites, and having more information there. Those are things that kind of really kind of ties into the point around kind of brand and kind of customer loyalty. But it's also kind of, I think, in terms of things like that, it's also being like kind of like it's also in that sort of way as well. Also as well, being kind of proactive about making yourself about kind of making about these accessibility standards is really about kind of putting an investment in your cost business over the medium and long term as well, because I think that these practices will evolve over time. Like the European Accessibility Act there will be further standards as well. So I think there will be further standards that will look to build on around what is already being offered in the EAA. So I think it's really in that sort of way as well. It's like once you kind of start focusing on kind of making processes and services more accessible, then it's easier to apply supports in the future. But it's also kind of it's also, I suppose, is really kind of saying to customers that these are your values as an organization about wanting to support everybody in your community, everybody in society and in the wider community to access to buy your products and access your services. But I think it also kind of shows as well that for many customers, they value businesses that are kind of ethical, that genuinely cares about society and inclusion and the wider community. So it's not just a tick box exercise. It's something that those are things that kind of do pay dividends well into the future. But I think it's really about kind of making that case that like it's what supports disabled people, supports everybody in society.
Thank you very much. And lastly, but by no means least, Nicole, what are you most looking forward to about the European Accessibility Act coming into force?
Thank you, Donal. So again, I'll just touch on from a hard of hearing perspective. The AI technology, hearing aid AI technology that we have at the moment has already transformed my daily life. But again, like we've all touched on, there's only so much the technology we use can do with the environment around us isn't designed to meet us halfway. So for example, ensuring industries take a multi-sensory approach to information updates, and even for transport systems, for example, ensuring that the audio and visual announcements are synchronized. As technology continues to evolve, the EAA will ensure that accessibility doesn't get left behind, but it keeps progress inclusive. And my advice to everyone would really be, don't wait for it to be perfect. Start by listening to the users, and don't think of accessibility, like it's been mentioned, as a small group of people. It's for everyone. And I just want to touch that it can also include your future self. For example, clear text, visual alerts, and easy interfaces all help everyone, but as well, it helps the elderly. And like it's been mentioned, that these things that help us all, they're not just for people with disabilities. And just to finish up, by 2027, there's a projection that nearly a million people will be over 65 in Ireland. And statistically, half of those will experience some hearing loss. So it is so important that you don't think of accessibility as others. It's all of us, really.
What a lovely way to finish this particular session, our panel session on the workshop today. Nicole, Adrian, Jakob, thank you so much for coming on, for sharing your insights, your experiences, and your hopes for the future. On behalf of myself and the Centre and all of the attendees, I would like to thank you all for sharing so openly with us today. It's been great having you and to listen to your experiences. Thank you all very, very much indeed. Well,
Thanks for having us.
No problem at all. Thank you.
Thanks a
Well,
lot. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Adrian. Great stuff. Thank you. We've had a lot of input this morning, and now I would like to turn to some useful resources and information and some possible next steps. I'm very pleased to welcome Avery Horne, Senior Standards and Monitoring Officer with the Centre for Excellence in Universal Design and the NDA, who's going to take us through a presentation now about some work that we've been working on and just some general next steps. Avery, over to you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Like Donal said there, my name is Avery Horne. I got a little bit of a promotion there by accident in that introduction. So I'm a Standards and Monitoring Officer at the Center for Excellence in Universal Design. And I just want to check if those slides are showing up.
All good.
Thanks so much. Okay, so like I said, yeah, my name is Avery Horne, and what I'm really going to do now is bring you through some next steps and some resources that you can hopefully use as you move towards implementation, which is, as we said, very, very soon. And so we're hoping to end today's webinar in a place where you have some things that you can do next. So I just want to mention here that all the resources that I'll mention in this presentation can be found at universaldesign.ie/EAA. And that will appear on the screen at the end of the presentation, and I'll read it out again, but just wanted to signpost that up front. So Jer actually opened this whole webinar today talking about who we are, so I won't go too far into it, but the Center for Excellence in Universal Design is focused on promoting design that can be accessed, understood, and used regardless of a person's age, size, ability, or disability. And we are a part of the National Disability Authority. We're not a separate organization. And Lianne also touched on our role as the NDA in the transposition of the EAA here in Ireland and the implementation. And so we advise on the accessibility requirements, and we do that with the market surveillance authorities and compliance authorities here in Ireland. So that means that when requested, we'll provide support to those regulators in developing guidelines and tools and advice on the accessibility requirements of the EAA. So first, I want to talk about, if you're unsure where to start after this presentation, what's really important is to look at the definitions in the EAA, and those are in Article 3 of SI 636/2023, which that's the statutory instrument that transposed the European Accessibility Act in Ireland. But it's really important that you look at those definitions. Those definitions are going to tell you if your product and service are implicated in this act. And even if they aren't, I do want to say that there are, as we've talked about at length here today, so many benefits, including benefits, economic benefits to you as a economic operator when going for procurement contracts, for example. So there are a lot of benefits, even if your product or service doesn't fall under the scope of the Act. However, in order to determine whether or not your product or service falls under the Act, you're going to want to look at those definitions and do that scoping exercise. And you might even find that there are multiple aspects to your offerings. For example, you might be the distributor or the producer of consumer terminal equipment that is covered by the Act, and you also might be selling it as a distributor through e-commerce. And so those would be different aspects of your offerings that are covered by the Act, and so that's really important to consider. After that, we would really encourage you to look at which of the accessibility requirements apply to the aspects of your product and service that are in the scope of the Act. So like we said before, there are many different types of products and services that are covered by the Act, but some of the products and services have sector-specific requirements. There are general requirements in the Act that apply to all products in scope, general requirements that apply to all services in scope, but then there are also specific requirements that, for example, cover consumer banking that are specific to that. So it's really important that you are ascertaining and doing that scoping exercise of what are the requirements that apply to us. And we do have on our website a page titled EAA Accessibility Requirements that gives some background information and also links the requirements in Schedule 1 in the SI, the statutory instrument for Ireland, and also Annex 1, which has the requirements in the directive. And that directive, of course, being the European Accessibility Act, Directive 2019/882. So that is some resources that you can find on our website. And again, really important to walk through which accessibility requirements are applicable to you. The next thing that we're really echoing what was already said on the panel today and really top down throughout this webinar, which is that accessibility is best implemented when you are considering the whole journey from the end-to-end chain for the widest range of users. Now, the European Accessibility Act covers, like was mentioned, support services, but also the design of your product if it falls under the scope. And even further back in the journey, it also has requirements on information about the accessibility of the product, the accessibility features, the interoperability with assistive technologies. And just to highlight something Emma said again, assistive technologies and the definition of assistive technologies is specific in the EAA. So again, those definitions are really important. But all to say that in order to really implement the accessibility requirements, it's important to consider the entire user journey and figure out where those touch points are within that user journey that accessibility needs to be improved. And something that I believe it was Nicole said earlier is that you want to be looking at the widest possible range of users. We need a diverse range of users because people are not a monolith, no matter where they come from or what disabilities they have. So it's really important to make sure you have that wide range of users when you're looking at that. And I want to link here as well our resource on our website titled Accessibility in the EAA. And that resource really talks about accessibility as a concept and how that interlinks with universal design, and just more importantly, how you can really implement accessibility in the EAA by understanding these fundamental concepts and really understanding the spirit of the law and not just what the requirements on the page are saying. So when you are thinking about the end-to-end chain and the widest range of users, you should ask yourself, can the widest range of users access and understand information about the product before they buy it, or perceive or understand any instructions in use? Perceive and understand information on disposal when they're done with the product, and access and understand and use any support services that they might need along any point in that journey. So again, asking yourself these questions and asking users. And the next step would be to implement the requirements. Easy. But that's a joke. I know that it's not easy to do. However, it is obviously very critical. And again, with the theme of today's webinar, involving users in your design and development process is critical to that. The requirements really come to life and also can't be implemented without the critical feedback of people with disabilities or disabled people in that process of the design and development. And there's a really great resource that outlines this process, and that is the European standard titled EN 17161, and that standard is currently being harmonized. It's the Design for All standard, and it talks about the process of involving users, among other things, and that actually will be out to public inquiry quite soon. And finally, we just have some more resources. If you're looking for more information, if you need more from here, we do have an overarching overview of the EAA on our webpage titled Overview of the EAA. And we also have our previous webinar on the EAA about decoding the accessibility requirements on our website. So just want to plug those there. And as I said earlier, all of the resources mentioned today in this last portion of the presentation can be found at universaldesign.ie.ea//EAA. I'll repeat that one more time, universaldesign.ie/EAA. And before I really close out, I do want to emphasize something that we have sprinkled through a little bit today in the presentation, but maybe haven't touched on totally, which is the standards, the standardization process that Emma mentioned following from the standardization request from the Commission. There are new standards in development that are pathways to comply with the EAA, and that work is currently being undertaken, and that's being undertaken through European standards bodies, but as member states, we have a role in having national mirror committees that can also contribute into this, into the creation and the revision of these standards. And so if you would like to get involved in that process in joining the National Standards Committee, we would really, really encourage you to express your interest by emailing the National Standards Authority, Ireland, NSAI, at info@nsai.ie for the attention of Fergal Finn in standards. It's critical that disabled people and disabled people's organizations are involved in that process. And so we really just want to emphasize the opportunity that we have right now as the standards are being written and revised. And finally, our partner, Accessible EU, would like to invite everyone to complete a short satisfaction survey, and that link will be sent out to everyone after this call. But if you so desire and would like, there is a QR code on screen right now that you can use to fill out the survey if that's available to you. And otherwise, we will be sending out the link shortly after this webinar for you to tell us what you think, because we do value your feedback. And this is our contact information and our website address here, which I've mentioned several times, https://universaldesign.ie. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Donal. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we really hope to hear from you.
Avery, thank you very much for that. It was great to have that such succinctly presented information, and thank you for all the work in putting it together. And that leads me very nicely. We're about to wrap up here, but a workshop and a webinar like this just doesn't happen by magic. A huge amount of work from a wide variety of people, both inside and outside the National Disability Authority, went into making today happen. I'm always nervous doing this because I invariably leave somebody out. So if I do leave you out and you have been involved, then please accept my thanks. But I want to specifically thank our colleagues who have worked with us today, providing ISL, Irish Sign Language, and captioning services. I also want to thank Cormac Staunton of Staunton Media, who, as ever, has been working behind the scenes to make sure everything runs like clockwork. Thank you, Cormac. To all of our presenters and members of our user experience panel, we really do appreciate you taking the time to share your insights, your knowledge, your experiences with us this morning. It has been super to have you on board. If I can, though, I'd like to specifically and specially thank the team, the EAA team within the Centre for Excellence in Universal Design at the National Disability Authority. That was Avery Horne, who you've just heard presenting, Orla Kennedy, who did Trojan work behind the scenes, putting a lot of the web resources together. Linda Rowan, who is the queen of organising workshops and webinars and everything else. This is their second one that has been pulled together in about 3 weeks. Linda is, unfortunately, from our perspective, heading off to a new role within the organisation. And just to say to Linda, thank you so much for everything over the years. It has been fantastic to have you as part of the team. We're going to miss you and to wish you the very, very best of luck in your new role. We will miss you, and you may get nabbed occasionally to organise workshops because you made the mistake of doing this so well. So thank you very much for putting everything together. I also want to thank Gerald Craddock, who, as ever, as Chief Officer of the Centre, has been wholly supportive of putting this together and has been a great help. And to our colleagues and friends at AHEAD, it's been wonderful to partner with you. It really, really has. Thank you so much for all the support, for helping us with spreading the word about this workshop, and for helping design the content. It's been a great collaboration, and hopefully we get to do it again in the future. We, as you know, are partnering with Accessible EU on this event, and I'd like to make you aware of 2 upcoming events. One of which is an event all about banking in the European Accessibility Act, which takes place. It's a hybrid event. It's in Brussels, but also hybrid. It's on the 1st of July. And we also have a Eurodays event all about accessibility, different aspects of accessibility as they relate to the European Accessibility Act, which again is a hybrid event and takes place on the 3rd of July. Again, if you look up Accessible EU, you'll find the website on your search engine of choice, and you'll get details of all the events there. We really would encourage you to participate and to get involved in those events. That's it from us. Thank you all very much, wherever you've joined us from in the world. Thank you very much for attending, for joining. We hope you found this useful. As Avery mentioned, we will be sending out a satisfaction survey to you. But that's it from us. So we wish you all a very pleasant rest of your day. Thank you and goodbye.